Welcome to HOA Meltdown Moments. The HOA wanted control, not safety. I work as an HVAC dispatcher. I record every call and ticket because documentation is the only thing that keeps chaos at bay. That habit saved my life when the HOA tried to tow me into oblivion. This is how it started. "You are going to respect the notice," Amy yelled, jabbing her finger at my car like it was a crime scene. She had a handheld plate scanner aimed at my rear bumper and a stack of bright orange violation slips tucked under her arm. I had parked in my own driveway the night before and left it there for one day because I had been on a double shift. Now, she was standing on my property at 7 in the morning, screaming about abandoned vehicles and community standards. I stepped outside in my green jacket, hoodie string pulled tight because the wind was already whipping through the cul-de-sac. "I am parked in my own driveway," I said. "This is my house." She shook her head hard enough to send her sleek black ponytail swinging. "Your vehicle has not moved in 24 hours. That qualifies as abandoned under Section 12.4 of the Parking Addendum. I am cleaning up the community today." She tapped the scanner screen and then shoved a paper at me. "This is your final courtesy notice before we authorize tow on site." I looked at the slip. The deadline said I had 72 hours to move the vehicle or provide proof of registration, but the notice was dated 2 days ago. "Amy, this says the notice period already expired." She smiled. "Exactly. So now I can call the tow vendor. But I am giving you one last chance because I am not unreasonable. Move it by noon or we hook it." A kid on a bike braked hard at the end of the driveway, mouth open, watching the whole thing. The wind yanked one of Amy's spare notices out from under her arm and sent it tumbling across the lawn. She did not chase it. She just stared at me with that flat, satisfied look people get when they think they have all the power. I stayed calm. I had one piece of proof that would end the whole game, but I was not ready to show it yet. "I need to see the actual rule," I said, "and I need to talk to the management company." Amy pulled a megaphone out of her car. She walked to the mailbox cluster at the corner and clicked it on. "Attention Villas at Lakeview Residence. This is your HOA treasurer. We are conducting a parking compliance sweep today. Any vehicle in violation will be towed at owner expense. No exceptions." 3 neighbors came out of their houses. One of them, an older guy named Rick, walked over. "What is going on?" "Amy is saying my car is abandoned because I did not drive it yesterday," I said. Rick looked at Amy, then back at me. "That is insane." Amy lowered the megaphone. "You are not the first person I have corrected, and you will not be the last. This neighborhood has rules. If people do not like them, they can move." I went back inside and called the management company. The receptionist put me through to the compliance coordinator, a woman named Linda. I explained the situation. She sighed. "Amy has been aggressive with enforcement lately. Let me pull your account." She put me on hold. When she came back, her tone had shifted. "Okay, so you do have an open violation for parking in your driveway longer than 24 consecutive hours. But that rule only applies to commercial vehicles or trailers. Is your car a commercial vehicle?" "No. It is a Honda Accord." "Then the citation should not have been issued. I will email Amy and tell her to void it." I felt a tiny bit of relief, but I also knew Amy was not going to let this go. "Can you send me a copy of that email?" "Sure. Give me 5 minutes." I hung up and walked back outside. Amy was still at the mailbox cluster, talking to another neighbor and gesturing toward my house. The portable folding sign stand she had dragged over read "Parking Enforcement in Progress" in handwritten letters. She picked it up and moved it so it was directly in front of my driveway entrance. Rick came over to me. "She is out of control," he said quietly. "Last month she tried to fine my daughter for parking her friend's car in our guest spot overnight. She said guest parking requires a 48-hour advance permit request." I nodded. I had heard rumors, but this was the first time I had been in the crosshairs. My phone buzzed. Linda had sent the email. I opened it. It was a short message to Amy with me copied, stating that the violation was issued in error and should be removed from my account immediately. I walked back to the mailbox cluster. "Amy, I just got an email from Linda at the management company. She says the citation was a mistake." Amy did not even look at the phone when I held it up. "I do not care what Linda says. I am the treasurer. I manage enforcement. If Linda has a problem, she can come to the next board meeting and argue with me there." "That is not how this works," Rick said. "The management company is hired by the board to enforce the rules. You do not get to overrule them." Amy turned the megaphone back on. "Rick, if you interfere with official HOA business again, I will file a harassment complaint against you." Rick held up his hands and walked away. I stood there for a second, letting the wind pull at my jacket. A home health aide was supposed to arrive at my neighbor's house in 2 hours, and I had just seen Amy eyeing the caregiver's car the last time she visited. I realized this was not just about my Honda. Amy was setting up a toe sweep, and she was going to hit everyone she could before lunch. I called Linda back. "She is refusing to void the citation," I said, "and I just saw a tow truck entering the neighborhood." Linda groaned. "Okay, I am going to send a cease and desist to the tow vendor right now. Do not let them hook your car. If they try, call the police." I hung up and walked to the street. The tow truck was a white flatbed with a company name I did not recognize. The driver got out, clipboard in hand. Amy walked over to him and pointed at my car, then at 2 other vehicles parked on the street. The driver nodded and took photos with his phone. I approached. "Excuse me, that is my car. There is no valid tow authorization." The driver looked at me, then at Amy. She is the one who called it in. She gave me a list. If you are enjoying this HOA nightmare, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss the ending. Amy handed him a printed sheet. "I will make an example out of you so everyone learns." She said it loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "This is what happens when you ignore the rules." The driver scratched his head. "Look, I just hook what I am told to hook. If you have a problem, you need to talk to her." I pulled out my phone and called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation. The dispatcher said an officer would be out within 30 minutes. I hung up and stood next to my car. Amy smiled. "You can call whoever you want. By the time they get here, your car will be on the truck." The driver walked back to the cab and started positioning the flatbed. I stood in the driveway, heart pounding. My HVAC dispatcher job requires a clean driving record. Any legal trouble tied to my vehicle could cost me my certification. That was my stakes. Amy knew it. She had asked around about me at the last board meeting, and someone had mentioned my job. Now she was using it as leverage. Rick came back outside. He was filming on his phone. "I am recording this," he announced. "If that truck hooks his car without valid authorization, I am sending this to the police and the management company." Amy stepped toward him. "You are harassing me, Rick." "I am standing on a public street," he said. "I can film whatever I want." The driver lowered the flatbed and started walking toward my Honda with the hook chain. I stepped in front of the car. "I am not moving," I said. "My management company voided the citation. If you hook this car, you are stealing it." The driver stopped. He looked at Amy. "Is that true?" Amy held up her own phone. "I have authorization from the board." I sent him a photo of the board resolution from last month giving me enforcement authority. That is not a tow authorization, I said. That is just a policy document. The driver rubbed his face. This is getting messy. I am going to call my dispatcher. He walked back to the truck and got on his radio. Amy turned to me. You are wasting everyone's time. This will cost you extra fees for the call-out. A police cruiser pulled up. The officer, a younger guy with a buzz cut, got out and looked around. Who called? I did, I said. The HOA is trying to tow my car without valid cause. The officer walked over to Amy. Do you have a tow authorization signed by the property owner or a valid legal notice? I have board authority, Amy said. She showed him the same phone screen. He shook his head. That is not enough. If the management company voided the citation, you cannot authorize a tow. If you proceed, I will have to file a report for attempted theft of services. Amy's face went red. This is my neighborhood. I am protecting property values. The officer turned to the tow driver. You need to leave. Do not hook anything. The driver nodded, relieved. He retracted the chain, raised the flatbed, and drove off. Amy stood there, shaking. You have not won, she said to me. I have other tools. The officer asked for my information and Amy's. He took notes on the hood of his cruiser. I am writing up an incident report, he said. If this happens again, call us immediately and reference this case number. He handed me a slip of paper with a number on it. Thank you, I said. The officer left. Rick came over and clapped me on the shoulder. That was close. I nodded, but I knew this was just round one. Amy had lost the tow attempt, but she still controlled the HOA bank account, the violation system, and the vendor contracts. I needed to build a case, fast. I went inside and started organizing documents. I printed the email from Linda. I pulled up the HOA governing documents and found the parking rule Amy had cited. It was clear the 24-hour rule only applied to commercial vehicles and trailers. My Accord did not qualify. I took screenshots and saved them in a folder labeled HOA evidence. Then I called my notary contact, a guy named Paul, who did mobile notary work and had helped me organize sworn statements for a contractor dispute last year. Paul, I need your help again, I said. The HOA is coming after me for parking violations that do not exist, and I think they are going to escalate. Paul laughed. Of course they are. What do you need? I need sworn witness statements from neighbors. And I need everything documented so it is court ready if this gets ugly. He agreed to come by that evening. I spent the rest of the day gathering evidence. I checked my dashcam footage. The camera had captured Amy approaching the car that morning, but the angle was partially blocked by sun glare on the windshield. She would definitely use that to claim the footage was fake or incomplete. I needed more. At 6 that evening, Paul showed up with his notary stamp and a folder of blank affidavit forms. We sat at my kitchen table. I walked him through everything: the initial violation notice with the backdated deadline, Amy's refusal to honor the management company's voiding of the citation, the tow truck confrontation, and the police report. Paul took notes. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is lock down witness statements from Rick and anyone else who saw the confrontation. Then we need a timeline that shows Amy is resetting cure deadlines so you can never actually comply. What do you mean resetting deadlines? Paul leaned back. If she keeps issuing new violations every time you fix the previous one, you are always in violation. It is a common HOA tactic. They use it to justify continuous fines and eventually a lien. That is exactly what I am worried about, I said. My job depends on staying out of legal trouble. If she puts a lien on my house and it goes to collections, it could trigger a background check issue. Paul nodded. Then we need to move fast. Get those statements tonight. Tomorrow, file a formal complaint with the management company and demand a hearing. Make sure everything is in writing. We walked over to Rick's house. Rick agreed to sign a statement describing what he had seen that morning. Paul notarized it on the spot. We got 2 more neighbors to sign statements as well. By 9 that night, I had a packet of sworn affidavits, the email from Linda, the police incident report number, and a printed copy of the actual parking rule showing my car did not qualify as a violation. The next morning, I scanned everything and sent it to Linda at the management company. I also sent a formal written complaint citing Amy's refusal to follow management directives and her attempt to authorize an illegal tow. I requested an emergency board hearing. Linda replied within an hour. We are scheduling a hearing for next week. In the meantime, I am instructing Amy in writing that she is not to issue any further citations to your property without management approval. I felt a small surge of hope, but that afternoon I came home to find a bright yellow sticker on my windshield. It was a new violation notice, this one claiming my vehicle registration was expired. I checked my registration. It was valid through next year. The sticker even had a handwritten note at the bottom. Final warning, next step is lien filing. I took a photo of the sticker and emailed it to Linda. This is retaliation, I wrote. She is ignoring your directive. Linda called me 10 minutes later. She sounded exhausted. I just got off the phone with Amy. She claims she issued that notice yesterday before my email, and it was already printed and placed. That is a lie, I said. I was home all yesterday afternoon. This sticker was not here when I left for work this morning. Linda sighed. I believe you. But Amy is denying it, and without proof of exactly when the sticker was placed, it is hard to enforce. I have a doorbell camera, I said. It records motion. Let me check the footage. I hung up and pulled up the camera app on my phone. The doorbell faced the driveway at an angle. I scrolled through the footage from the previous night. At 11:47, Amy's car pulled into my driveway. She got out, walked to my Honda, and slapped the sticker on the windshield. Then she stood there for a second, looking directly at the camera, and smiled before walking back to her car. I saved the clip and sent it to Linda with the subject line proof off retaliation after your direct dive. Linda replied immediately. That is clear evidence of bad faith. I am forwarding this to the board president and recommending Amy be removed from enforcement duties pending the hearing. I felt a wave of relief, but I also knew Amy would not stop. She was too invested in making me an example. I needed to prepare for the hearing like it was a trial. Over the next few days, I built a timeline document showing every interaction with Amy, every email from Linda, every violation notice, and every response. I included timestamps, photos, and witness statements. I also reached out to a local attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. Her name was Karen, which was ironic, but she had good reviews. She agreed to a consultation. We met at a coffee shop. I showed her everything. She flipped through the packet and whistled. This is a textbook case of selective enforcement and retaliation. If the board does not remove her from enforcement, you have grounds for a lawsuit. What about the hearing? I asked. Bring everything. Present it like you are testifying in court. Stay calm, stick to facts, and let the evidence speak for itself. If Amy tries to interrupt or deflect, just refer back to the timeline and the documents. Boards hate liability, and she is creating a huge liability problem for them. I left the meeting feeling more confident. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. I spent the weekend making copies of the evidence packet for every board member. Monday afternoon, I got a text from Rick. Amy is going door to door with a petition to recall you from the neighborhood. I blinked at my phone. I am not on the board. You cannot recall a regular homeowner. Rick sent a photo of the petition. It was titled Petition to Remove Problem Resident and listed a bunch of vague complaints about me being disruptive and hostile to community standards. Amy had already collected 15 signatures. I called the attorney. She laughed. That petition is legally meaningless. She is trying to intimidate you and poison the board against you before the hearing. Ignore it. But what if the board takes it seriously? Then you show them the timeline and ask why she is circulating a petition instead of addressing the actual evidence. It makes her look desperate. I felt better, but I also knew the hearing was going to be a fight. Tuesday evening, I arrived at the clubhouse at 6:45. I carried 2 folders, one with my evidence packet and one with extra copies for the board. Rick came with me as a witness. Paul the notary also showed up, in case we needed anything notarized on the spot. The clubhouse was a small building with a single meeting room and a kitchenette. The board president, a retired engineer named Don, was setting up chairs. 2 other board members, Sandra and Mike, were chatting by the coffee station. Amy was already seated at the front table, looking calm and composed. She had a stack of documents in front of her and her portable folding sign stand propped against the wall behind her. Don called the meeting to order at 7. First item is the dispute between Amy Anderson and the homeowner at 4215 Canyon Ridge. We will hear from Amy first, then from the homeowner, then we will deliberate. Amy stood up. She spoke for 10 minutes. She claimed I had repeatedly violated parking rules, ignored courtesy notices, harassed her during enforcement, and filed false complaints to undermine her authority. She showed photos of my car in the driveway and read from the parking addendum, twisting the language to make it sound like any vehicle that did not move for 24 hours was a violation. When she finished, Don turned to me. Your turn. I stood up and handed out the evidence packets. I walked the board through the timeline, page by page. I showed the email from Linda voiding the original citation. I showed the police incident report from the tow truck confrontation. I showed the doorbell video of Amy placing the retaliation sticker after Linda's directive. I showed the sworn affidavits from Rick and the other neighbors. Finally, I showed the actual parking rule text with the commercial vehicle clause highlighted. Amy interrupted. Those affidavits are biased. Rick has a personal grudge against me. Don held up his hand. Let him finish. I continued. I also have proof that Amy has been resetting enforcement deadlines to make it impossible for me to cure violations. Every time I respond to a notice, she issues a new one with a new justification. That is not enforcement. That is harassment. Amy stood up again. I will make an example out of you so everyone learns. This is about maintaining standards. Sandra, one of the board members, frowned. Amy, that is not an appropriate thing to say in a hearing. I stayed calm. I also want to address the petition she has been circulating. I pulled out a copy. This petition asks the board to remove me as a problem resident, but I am not on the board and I have not violated any legitimate rules. This is retaliation, plain and simple. Don looked at Amy. Did you circulate this petition? Yes. I was exercising my right to gather community input. Don shook his head. That is not how this works. You are creating a hostile environment. The board deliberated for 15 minutes in a side room. When they came back, Don read a prepared statement. The board finds that the original parking citation was issued in error and should have been voided when management directed. We also find that Amy's subsequent actions, including the retaliation sticker and the petition, were inappropriate. Effective immediately, Amy is removed from all enforcement duties. Any future violations must be processed through the management company only. Amy stood up, face red. You are making a mistake. This neighborhood will fall apart without proper enforcement. Don ignored her. The homeowner is entitled to a full refund of any fines paid, and we are issuing a formal apology for the inconvenience." I felt a surge of relief, but I knew Amy was not done. She stormed out of the clubhouse, slamming the door. Rick leaned over. "You won." "For now," I said. The next morning, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a law firm representing the HOA. The letter claimed I owed $800 in unpaid enforcement fees, administrative costs, and a new category called compliance surcharge. The letter also stated that if I did not pay within 10 days, the HOA would file a lien on my property. I called Linda immediately. "Did you authorize this?" "No," she said. "Let me look into it." She called me back an hour later. Amy sent that letter without board approval. The law firm is her personal attorney, not the HOA's attorney. This is completely improper. So what do I do? Ignore it. I am sending a cease and desist to the attorney and informing the board. If she keeps this up, the board will have grounds to remove her from the board entirely. But the letter also revealed something important. Amy had been paying the tow vendor extra fees under the table to prioritize her enforcement calls. That was the twist. The tow driver had admitted to Rick, off the record, that Amy had promised him bonuses if he hooked cars first and asked questions later. It was a kickback scheme, and it explained why the tow truck had shown up so fast the first morning. I called the attorney I had consulted earlier. "This changes everything," she said. "If you can prove she was paying the tow vendor off the books, that is fraud and misappropriation of HOA funds. The board has to act, and you may have grounds for a civil suit." How do I prove it? Get the tow driver to talk on the record. Offer him immunity if he cooperates. If he refuses, file a complaint with the management company and let them subpoena his records. I reached out to Rick and asked if he could get the tow driver's contact info. Rick texted me a name and number an hour later. I called the driver. He was hesitant at first, but when I explained that Amy's scheme was putting him at legal risk, he agreed to give a recorded statement to Paul the notary. We met at a coffee shop the next day. The driver, whose name was Greg, explained that Amy had been paying him $50 cash per tow on top of the HOA's contracted rate. She called it a performance incentive, but there was no board approval and no paper trail. Greg had been doing it for 6 months, and he had personally hooked 11 cars during that time. Paul notarized Greg's statement, and I sent it to Linda along with a formal complaint. Linda forwarded it to the board president and the HOA's attorney. Within 2 days, the board called an emergency meeting and voted to terminate the tow vendor contract. They also voted to remove Amy from the board entirely, pending a full financial audit. Amy tried to fight it. She showed up at the next board meeting with her own attorney and demanded a chance to defend herself. Dawn let her speak. She claimed Greg was lying, that the notarized statement was fabricated, and that I had orchestrated the whole thing to destroy her reputation. Then I played my trump card. I had one piece of proof that would end the whole game. I pulled out a stack of certified letters, each one stamped and dated. These are copies of every cure response I sent to the HOA over the past 3 months, I said. Every single one was delivered and signed for by management. But Amy kept issuing new violations as if I had never responded. She reset the cure deadlines so I could never be done with the dispute. That is not enforcement. That is extortion. I handed the letters to Dawn. Each one had a certified mail receipt attached, showing the exact date and time of delivery. The board reviewed them in silence. Dawn looked at Amy. "You received these, correct?" Amy hesitated. "I do not recall." "Management has copies of all the sign-in logs," I said. "You personally signed for 3 of them." Sandra, the board member, shook her head. "This is bad, Amy." Dawn closed the folder. The board finds sufficient cause to remove Amy Anderson from the board and from all HOA responsibilities, effective immediately. We are also referring this matter to our attorney for possible recovery of misappropriated funds." Amy stood up, shaking. "You are all going to regret this." Don motioned to the door. "You need to leave." Amy grabbed her portable folding sign stand and walked out. The next week, the HOA sent me a settlement letter. It included a full refund of all fines and fees, a written apology, and a formal no-contact directive prohibiting Amy from communicating with me or entering my property. The letter also stated that the HOA was implementing new enforcement procedures to prevent retaliatory actions, with penalties for any board member who violated the policy. I also got a call from Linda. The financial audit found that Amy had been charging enforcement fees to multiple homeowners without board approval and keeping a portion of the tow vendor payments. The total amount was over $12,000. The board is pursuing legal action to recover the funds, and they are considering a criminal referral. Rick came over that evening with a six-pack. We sat on my porch and watched the sunset over the neighborhood. "You did it," he said. I nodded. "But it should not have taken this much work just to park in my own driveway." Rick laughed. "Welcome to HOA life." A few days later, I got a text from Greg, the tow driver. He said the HOA had canceled the vendor contract and blacklisted the company. He was mad at first, but then he realized Amy had been setting him up to take the fall if anyone ever investigated. He thanked me for forcing the issue into the open before it got worse. I also started getting thank you messages from other neighbors. Apparently, Amy had been targeting multiple households with similar tactics, and my case had given them the courage to file their own complaints. The board ended up issuing refunds to 7 other homeowners and revising the enforcement policies to require management company approval for any citation. The final showdown happened 3 weeks later. I was getting my mail at the cluster when a police cruiser pulled up. The officer got out and approached me. "Are you the homeowner at 4215 Canyon Ridge?" "Yes." "We received a report that you have been harassing a former board member. I need to ask you a few questions." My stomach dropped. I have not contacted her at all. There is a no-contact directive in place. The officer nodded. "That is what I thought. She filed a false report claiming you have been sending threatening emails. But when we asked her to provide the emails, she could not." He wrote something on his notepad on the hood of his cruiser. "I am documenting this as a false report. If she contacts you or files any more complaints, let us know immediately and reference this incident number." He handed me a slip of paper. I thanked him and went back inside. Amy was trying one last time to make my life hell, but she had finally run out of leverage. That evening, I got an email from Don, the board president. He said the board had finalized the settlement and Amy had been formally banned from all HOA meetings and events. He also said the board was recommending criminal charges for misappropriation of funds. A month later, the HOA held a community meeting to present the new enforcement policies. I showed up with Rick and Paul. The parking lot was full. Inside the clubhouse, Don stood at the front and explained the changes. All enforcement actions now required management company approval. All fines had to be disclosed in advance with a clear appeals process. And any board member who engaged in retaliatory enforcement would be removed immediately. At the end of the meeting, several neighbors came up to me and thanked me. One woman said she had been fighting a bogus landscaping fine for months, and my case had given her the template to win her appeal. Another guy said he had been too scared to challenge the board, but now he felt like it was safe to push back. Rick leaned over. "You changed the whole culture here." I shrugged. I just wanted to park in my own driveway. But the real payoff came 2 weeks later. I got a certified letter from the HOA's attorney. It was a final settlement agreement. In exchange for releasing any claims against the HOA, I would receive a full refund of all fines and fees, reimbursement for my attorney consultation costs, and a written guarantee that no enforcement actions would be taken against my property for 2 years unless I committed a clear documented violation. The letter also included a formal no-contact directive against Amy, enforceable by court order if violated. I signed it and sent it back. The next day, I got a check for $1,400 covering every bogus fine, every tow threat, and every administrative fee Amy had invented. That weekend, I ran into Amy at the grocery store. She was in the produce section, and she saw me before I saw her. She turned and walked the other way without saying a word. I grabbed my apples and left. I did not need to gloat. The paper trail had done all the talking. A few months later, the HOA held an election to fill Amy's vacant board seat. A retired teacher named Gloria won. She ran on a platform of transparency and fair enforcement. At her first meeting, she proposed a rule that any homeowner facing a fine had the right to a hearing before payment was required. The board passed it unanimously. Rick texted me after the meeting. "We won for real this time." I smiled and put my phone down. The whole experience had been exhausting, but it taught me something important. Documentation beats intimidation every time. Amy had all the power, all the authority, and all the aggression. But I had emails, certified letters, notarized statements, doorbell footage, and a timeline that proved every single lie she told. In the end, the HOA canceled the vendor relationship tied to the abuse. Amy got placed on a no-contact directive by management, and I won through a documented appeal that overturned the decision on the record. The funny karma beat came when Amy claimed she never came by to place that retaliation sticker, and then the doorbell video played in front of the entire board. Her face went white, and she could not say a word. I still live in the villas at Lakeview. The neighborhood is quieter now. The new board actually enforces rules fairly, and people are not afraid to park in their own driveways anymore. Every now and then, I see Amy driving past my house, but she never stops, never slows down, never makes eye contact. I keep the settlement letter framed on my office wall right next to my HVAC dispatcher certifications. It is a reminder that even when someone tries to tow your life out from under you, you can fight back and win as long as you stay calm and keep the receipts. I will see you again soon.